Hey, this is Andy here with Libertarian Revolution, and I'm coming to you today from Alexandria, Virginia. We're at a hotel here, the Hampton Inn. There's a LNC, Libertarian National Committee meeting this week, or going on right now, that's why we're here. And I've got a very interesting guest with me today from California. Are you still living in California, I assume?
Yeah, I'm in California.
Yeah, this is Boomer Shannon, longtime Libertarian Party super activist, and he was a campaign manager for somebody who actually got elected as a Libertarian. And not only did they get elected to a Libertarian, they got elected to a relatively significant office, and in fact is the highest Libertarian Party office holder currently in the country. That is Jeff Hewitt, who just recently got elected to the Riverside County, California Board of Supervisors. Riverside County is the fourth most populated county in California. I believe it has about, 2.6 million people? Something like that?
Yeah, just shy of 2.6.
2.6 million people. And where is it ranked, do you know, in terms of counties in the U.S.? 10th. The 10th most populated county in the United States of America. The county seat, I believe, is the city of Riverside.
That's right.
And for those of you who don't know your county or your California county geography very well, Riverside County borders, it's inland, and it borders, San Diego County, Orange County, Los Angeles County, San Bernardino.
Not Los Angeles.
Oh, it doesn't border?
That's
that's right.
There's like a 15-mile strip that it doesn't actually touch. But
yeah, I should know that, being that I lived out there. I just didn't remember that it didn't border Los Angeles County. It comes close to Los Angeles County.
You have to drive through a very small corner of San Bernardino County to get to L.A.
Yeah, it's got Los Angeles spillover suburbs. It's got some suburbs of kind of spillover from Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Diego around like Temecula.
Yeah, well, the Los Angeles Metroplex is interesting because you've got about 700 miles of circumference from Rosarito Beach to Ventura, from the beach to the mountains. If you draw a line around all where the metropolitan is, it's about 700 miles in circumference. So it's one big city. Mm-hmm. But Riverside County is a fantastic place. We ran in District 5, and that is the cities of Banning, Beaumont, Moreno Valley, Paris, and Menifee, including some unincorporated areas there. And we ran against a former Republican, turned out a Republican assemblyman. And we were able to pull out a win. We were outraised almost 3-1. Mm-hmm. We raised about $550,000. The Republican opponent took substantial money from the public employee unions, so we nailed him on that. He had some lawsuits and things like that he was involved with at the local city and his construction business, and we nailed him on that. So, it was a really good race. We really had a lot of fun, and Jeff was a great candidate.
Now, before I get into some more questions about that campaign, how did you get started as a Libertarian? How long have you been a Libertarian, and how did you get into it?
I got started in Libertarianism before I could even vote, actually. I attended the 2005 Los Angeles Convention for California before I could even vote. So I was pretty much there before I got there. I got involved in activism in high school.
Mm-hmm. How did you find out about it?
Libertarianism? Mm-hmm. A mentor of mine pointed it out to me. He goes, I think you've got a kind of a strong libertarian streak. So I started reading. I think that the first time that I really realized I was a libertarian is I watched a speech from Ron Paul. I think it was at Columbia University or something like that. Mm-hmm. It was mind blowing. So it was a big bonus for me.
And that would have been back in 2005.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Okay.
So then I worked on the Ron Paul 08 campaign. I worked on No on 8, which was the pro-gay marriage issue in California. I worked on...
Did you go straight to Libertarian Party, or did you go to Ron Paul first?
I went straight to Libertarian Party.
Okay, but you were still supporting Ron Paul.
Yeah. Okay. No, I wasn't a Republican, and I was already involved in the Libertarian Party when we finally started working on the campaigns. But it was a combination of some really smart people around that kind of pointed me in the right direction, and guys like Ron Paul that really solidified it for me. So.
Now, your name is Boomer. Is that your real name, or is it because that's sort of an unusual name?
Yeah, it's an unusual name. And,
Does it come from something, or I don't know if I've ever heard anybody named Boomer before.
It's a long story, but I've been called. It's a
okay. I was wondering if it was a nickname.
It's a nickname, but I've been called that since I was a very, very, very young child.
Oh, okay. So do you have something else that's your legal first name?
I do.
Oh, do you want to say what? You don't have to if you don't want to. Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Everybody, the only people that call me by my real name have gavels or badges.
So, how many campaigns have you worked on? Like you said, you worked on Ron Paul.
Tons. So, in 08, Prop 19, TRC 2010.
Prop 19, was that the first attempt at marijuana legalization?
Well, that wasn't the first attempt. Prop 215 was that.
Oh, that was marijuana, medical.
I was like 9 when that happened. But yeah, we had that was I was Southern California director for that campaign. We lost by less than the margin of error in California. It was a very close race, but that was kind of my first statewide. I worked on the CCHI, the Jack Herer initiative, a couple of years. Regulate marijuana like wine. I ran Gary Johnson's campaigns in California in 2012 and 2016. I've worked probably about 24 local marijuana races.
What did you do for the local marijuana races?
Well, I was honestly, I was shit broke, and so what was going on with the dispensaries in California is that they couldn't bank. Right? They had basically stashes of money everywhere. So I went from dispensary to dispensary, trying to convince dispensary owners that they should take on the cities and the municipalities to try and make their situation a little better and spend some of that money. So we ran petitioning drives in a number of cities in California with moderate success.
I know that the local marijuana dispensaries in California have been under attack for a long time. Now, it seems like those attacks from the federal government kind of died off a few years ago.
Yeah, under the Obama administration, they stopped.
They finally gave up. I know he was enforcing it at first, but I think a couple years into his administration kind of maybe realized it was a losing battle.
Yeah, and that was kind of the time that I was really trying to push the local initiatives, because it was some protection from the cities and stuff like that if they had some legal standings, or they were in process of that. Through the petitioning process or through that balloting process, they had some protections.
Now, doesn't the California law for medical and also for legalization have some sort of provision in it that says that the cities and counties can do some kind of regulations or something?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so in other words, like if a city government, like maybe a city council or maybe through an initiative, votes that like we don't want marijuana in our city or county, they can do that under the law. Am I correct?
Yeah, there's some complications there. They can't do things like ban deliveries and things like that. I mean, they had under the medical provisions, a patient has to have access.
Okay.
So they have to have some access. Most cities are finding that the moderate tax revenues are pretty good for them. And in Riverside County, they're in the process of starting that county-wide for unincorporated areas.
Yeah, I know there's been battles out there going on for a long time in some of the municipalities and counties over this issue.
Yeah, so there's a couple different mindsets that they have. One of them is like a straight tax on excise, which I think is the best. It's probably the most equitable. They do things like community benefit projects. So like if you're in a bidding process and you want to be able to open a dispensary in your area, I'm going to build a sidewalk here and put some streetlights in here, and then I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and then basically they use that as kind of a way to up front get these organizations to start spending money in development funds.
Now, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're okay.
I was going to say, have you run for office before?
Yes, I have. I ran for 62 Assembly when I was 18. And then I ran after top 2 in California, so we got jungle primary in 2014.
So you ran before top 2?
I did,
and then you ran. So you were actually on the ballot as a Libertarian then?
I did not make the ballot.
Oh, what happened?
I don't recall.
Did you not? Isn't there a small signature requirement you had to complete?
There was a signature requirement. I think it was the money that I didn't end up getting, but I ran out there, and then I ran in a special election in my hometown in Temple City after post Prop 14 for the top 2 to kind of get an understanding of what the new regulations looked like. I was just kind of doing it as an exploratory thing. I wanted to understand. I wanted to run candidates, so I kind of just threw myself in there to understand that process.
Oh, now when you say you didn't make the ballot, did you not make the ballot because you didn't get enough signatures, or did you not have enough money for a filing fee, or did you decide to drop out of the race?
15 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember exactly why that happened. It was a while ago.
Okay.
But for the write-in one, we were able to secure that write-in.
Now, top 2 primary has been a really terrible election law that's really devastated the Libertarian Party of California. And, it's a shame for me because I actually, when I first got involved in the Libertarian Party, I was in Pennsylvania. Yeah. But a few years later, I moved to California, and the LP of California was really kicking butt. This is like late 90s, early 2000s. LP of California had like a state party budget of like $500,000. They had, they were running lots of candidates. They had a full-time executive director. In fact, I think when I first came into California, I think they actually had 2 full-time employees, and they lowered it down to 1. But anyway, LP California, went through a lot of infighting, and then that horrible top 2 election law passed, and it's been really hard for the LP of California since then, and they passed top 2 in Washington before that.
That's right.
And it's caused problems up there as well. Yeah. I think now, isn't the law in California actually worse than the one in Washington?
I don't know enough to speak to it.
Well, I think there was an issue with California not allowing write-in votes. Is that correct? Was that ever resolved? I heard there was.
I believe they were write-in votes.
Okay, maybe I know at first it banned write-in votes, and I remember hearing there was a lawsuit about that, but I maybe they won the lawsuit. I don't know. But anyway, I know in California there was somebody. It wasn't a libertarian, but somebody filed a ballot initiative. I think it was 2-3 years ago, to repeal top 2 primary.
That's right.
And unfortunately, they didn't get enough signatures to qualify for the ballot.
That's right.
Yeah, and then now in California, they base the signature requirements for ballot initiatives and for candidates.
1% of gubernatorial elections.
Yes, and voter turnout went way up in California.
So we see cyclical, right? So presidential years, you see a large increase, and then you see the increase in the governor's races. So you have what happens is that in the down years, in between these 2 major spikes in elections, it's much harder for you to be able to get the political engagement that you normally would have.
Yeah.
Compared to those 2 high points.
Yeah. Well. Anyway, the signature requirement in California because I talked to Richard Winger about this. Like, what would you? What kind of initiative? Because there's constitutional amendment and there's statute. And a constitutional amendment takes more signatures than a statutory initiative. Yeah. And Richard Winger said to repeal top 2, you'd have to do a constitutional amendment. Yeah. And so the requirement in California for a constitutional amendment was 585,000 valid signatures. As of this governor's race they just had out there, it went from 585 to 997,000 signatures. Yeah. So now repealing top 2 would be an even more monumental task than it was before. Now I do see one silver light, and that is that a lot of Republicans in California seem to be getting upset at top 2 primary.
Yeah.
I remember when top 2 passed, and I was putting out warnings. There was the original attempt to get top 2 in California was actually back in 2004.
Right.
There was a ballot initiative. It made the ballot through a petition, and fortunately it got voted down.
That's right.
And then in 2010, and that petition was supported by both the Democrat and Republican establishment.
Yeah.
2010, both major party establishments. This time they didn't do a petition. The legislature put it on the ballot, and they put it on in the June primary.
That was a backroom deal with Abel Maldonado and Governor Schwarzenegger.
Yep. And Schwarzenegger said that one of his biggest priorities before he left office was to get top 2 passed. So that was pretty rotten. But anyway, he was colluding with the Democrat Maldonado.
Well, it's look. I mean, we could cry over spilled milk for what it is, but the fact of the matter is that we've got an election law in California, and we need to be able to make it work no matter what, right?
Yeah.
The nice thing about top 2 is that if you're able to get through the primary, right, and that's just running straight name ID, right? When you have a split race like we had 5 in the primary for Jeff Hewitt's campaign, and we basically just ran straight name ID. We didn't talk very much about issues at all. We didn't really do anything else but put Jeff's face and his name out there in as big a way as humanly possible. Yeah,
I know there were a few libertarians in this last election in California that were running for state legislature. I think there were 3 or 4 that actually made it through the top 2.
So one of them was an unopposed seat, and then one of them was a write-in to unopposed seat. That was Quigley. And he's a good guy. He did a great race. He was a real hustler. I mean, he was out there just flying cars by himself and doing those kinds of things. But it takes and not to disparage Justin's work out there because he's a real stud. But it takes a certain amount of not only understanding how to run the race, but it takes being able to coordinate the people to be able to do it and run an effective campaign. And it also takes money, right? And until you're able to get those 3 things kind of put together and working in an engine. Pretty much every campaign is impossible. You have to have all 3 of those components in some real way. So we have lots of people that are running on those elections, and they might be able to get onto the ballot, but they have nothing that they can do to be able to fight back against the general election.
Yeah. Now, what was I to say about top 2 though? Because I know for Senate, it ended up being Democrat versus Democrat.
That's right.
And a lot of Republicans were mad about that. And I talked to a lot of when top 2 first passed in California, a lot of people didn't care. They didn't even know what it was. And then, I talked to people out there, not people involved in the Libertarian Party, but just sort of the general public. And I had people out there, asking me, hey, how come we don't have any other parties on the ballot anymore? What happened to the Libertarian Party? What happened to the Green Party? They didn't even know what was going on. And anyway, they've had some big races in California, like the Senate race where it was what, Kamala Harris for the Democrat versus, do you know, I can't remember who she was running with, but it was two Democrats.
Yeah.
And did that happen for governor? No, it didn't happen for governor, maybe, but it happened for some other races in California.
Most of the Senate seats, most of the congressional seats went to Democrats.
Yeah, and it's been, I think there have been a few races where it's been Republican versus Republican. It's mostly been Democrat versus Democrat, but it was particularly that high-profile U.S. Senate race that got a lot of the rank-and-file Republicans really pissed off because they had no choice, and there was a record number of people who actually just left their ballot blank for Senate. They didn't want to vote for either of the Democrats. So, going forward, I think one possibility that maybe the minor parties could align with the grassroots Republicans to possibly get top two repealed at some point down the road.
That was exactly my thought. I was actually at the GOP convention a couple of weeks ago and meeting with people out there and talking about this issue and many others. But it's about going out and building coalitions, right? I think that oftentimes libertarians and most third-party folks just kind of look at the D's and R's as evil beasts and don't really want to engage with those guys, but they have interests, and if you're able to find commonality, you can get them to come along with you, and it also helps build for things like lobbying and coalition building down the road, right? It's kind of the deal. So we went out there and checked out their election. They elected a nice young woman to be their chairman out there. And they had a good time. So we talked to some candidates out there that were interested in running and meeting with those guys, and there's a lot of. I'm happy to report that a lot of the Republicans that were there, will quietly. Then they knew that Jeff and I were libertarians, and they quietly report that, hey, I'm a libertarian too. It's just I want to try and change it from the inside, right? So we've got a lot of allies out there that really want to work on things, and Top 2 is one of them.
Yeah. Now the Jeff Hewitt. Now I know all the local races in California are officially nonpartisan. They don't put party labels on.
That's right.
But now Jeff Hewitt got elected mayor of Cali Mesa.
Yes.
How big a city is Cali Mesa?
Cali Mesa is about 8,500 people.
Okay, and what is that near? What's like the nearest major city? Just trying to think of where that is.
I guess Riverside would be the nearest major city.
Okay, and that's like over 200,000 people.
It's tucked in between a town called Yucaipa and a town called Beaumont.
Oh, okay.
Which are both substantial, about 80,000 people.
Okay, and how long was he the mayor of Cali Mesa?
So that's a rotating week mayor system. So he was on the council for 8 years and mayor for 3.
And was he a member of the Libertarian Party during that whole time, or did
he?
Oh, wow! So he's been around for a while. Now, how many people in Cali Mesa and then also just in Greater Riverside County know that he's a libertarian?
Everybody.
Okay, so he's well known as a libertarian. I know he got on after he got elected. Didn't the Los Angeles Times do a story on him? Was he on the front page? Front page of the Los Angeles Times, which is a huge newspaper. So that's
the biggest newspaper out there. It was a really good thing, and they got a great article. It's basically talking about how libertarians are starting to move up in the world when it comes to electoral politics, which is good.
Yeah,
they were very, very, very kind to us. They painted us in a great light, and we're very grateful for that.
Now I know that the presidential candidates in California are exempt from Top 2, but it applies to all the state offices and U.S. House and Senate. Does it also apply to the city and county offices?
Yeah, well, yes. So the county offices, absolutely, and it's across the board.
And is there did he have to collect petition signatures to get on the ballot? I know libertarians running for the mayor of Los Angeles and Los Angeles City Council have to collect signatures to get on the ballot. Did you know if Jeff had to collect signatures to get on the ballot?
I mean, I think he just paid the fee.
Oh, okay. And so there's 5 people on the Riverside County Board of Supervisors.
That's right.
And so basically, we've got libertarians have got 20% of the vote. What are the other 4 members? What are the party affiliations of the other 4 people?
Well, it's a nonpartisan race, but it's split down the middle. So we've got 2 Dems and 2 Republicans.
Okay. So I mean, obviously, he hasn't been in office that long as the on the Board of Supervisors, but he was mayor. Do you know anything that he did or that would be interesting to viewers as mayor of Cali Mesa or on the Cali Mesa City Council?
Well, absolutely. When he was mayor, one of the big issues in California right now is the pension debt. We have about $1 trillion in unfunded liabilities for paying public employee pensions. So Cali Mesa, being a small town, had a fire department. They had a number. I think they had 12 or 15 firefighters, and they got their own little fire department there, their own truck and stuff like that. But they were contracting with Cal Fire, which is the California Fire Union. And they're the largest The largest county they have in the state is actually Riverside County. The other larger municipalities have their own private fire department, their own municipal fire departments. So Cal Fire was in there. Basically, Cal Fire came and said, "Hey, we want you guys to add an extra man on all of your shifts, right?" And the firefighter, per year is about $300,000 in the small city of Calamasa with a budget of $5 million a year, wasn't going to be able to afford that. So they had to find something else to do. They worked on trying to find mutual aid solutions and everything else. Basically, the unions came down and tried to hammer the small city of Calamasa while Jeff was mayor. And Jeff said, "You know what? Screw this." So what he did was he was actually able to start his own fire department. He was able to get rid of the Cal Fire union in the city through their contracting process.
Oh, now just to is Cal Fire was that like a government agency, or was it like an outside contractor?
It's an outside contractor,
Okay.
but they handle a lot of the fire services in California. It's a huge unit. So basically, what happened was that they were able to get that union out of Calamasa and put everybody, instead of on defined benefit, on defined contribution systems. So now that all the firefighters in that area have 401ks, very competitive and sustainable 401ks, so that the future fiscal health of Calamasa is going to be able to be sustained. Right? There are some cities in Riverside County right now that pay 80% of their discretional budget towards covering just pension costs. Before a single pothole is filled, before a single street light is built, before a single crossing guard is paid, they have to pay their pension debts by law. So services are shrinking every single year, and these liabilities are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and the people that pay taxes get less and less and less because of these situations.
Now, are you familiar with Art Olivier?
I am.
Yeah. He had been elected to the Bellflower City Council back in the 90s, and then he got elected mayor. That was a city of 70,000 people, which I think is the largest city a Libertarian has ever been elected mayor. And then later he went on to be the LP candidate for vice president, and he ran for governor of California as a Libertarian.
Great guy.
He is. He's in my opinion, I think he's the best vice presidential candidate the Libertarian Party's ever had.
He also made a movie too.
Yeah, he did about 9/11, which I think is really cool, and I agree with him. But anyway, is Art? I haven't heard anything about him. Last time I know he was at the 2012 LP convention. Is he still around? And did anybody talk to him about Jeff Hewitt's campaign?
Yeah, matter of fact, he was very supportive of Jeff. He came out to a funder that we did shortly after Jeff was elected, and talked about what was going on there. Super nice guy. I mean, he's not particularly active in the politics side of things anymore. He's focusing on his business and his family, but he's still around, and he's a great asset for us. And he certainly has carried the banner for long enough, and it's time to pass it on to the next Jeff.
Oh yeah. Now, has the Libertarian Party? I know they've had a lot of local offices in California over the years. Have they ever elected anybody to any county board of supervisors positions in any other counties? I thought they did. I could be wrong though.
There was a woman in the 70s who ended up turning into a Republican, whose name escapes me, but I believe it was in Riverside County as well.
Oh, okay.
The name.
Well, that's okay. It was, I thought there was somebody more. I know there was a guy who got elected as like a district attorney somewhere in Northern California. It wasn't one of like the highest population counties, though.
Yeah, but
that was a while ago.
We had somebody like John Inks, who was on the Mountain View, I believe it was. City council for a number of terms, and he actually just lost an election this year. So we've had some large city council candidates throughout the state.
Now, I know the highest office the Libertarian Party has ever won has been seats in state legislatures. I mean, in terms of like level of government, in New Hampshire, Alaska, and Vermont, although the guy in Vermont switched to Republican about 6 months into his term. But anyway, how does Jeff's victory compare to getting elected to the state legislature in, say...
All right, so let's look at this in a bit of a different way, right? I think that the county supervisor seat in Riverside is one of the most popular, most powerful positions in all of the politics in California, and I'll tell you why. Right, when you are one of 40 or one of 80, if you're on the Senate or the Assembly, you have one vote, and you've got to be able, especially as a freshman, you have really no clout whatsoever, right? It's very, very difficult for you to get something done in the legislature. You have to kind of go along to get anything done, right? Very easily marginalized. But the county supervisor is a very interesting position because it is where the rubber meets the road for law. Right, the legislator passes something down, it just gets dropped into the county's lap for the most part. Right, they don't do enforcement; the county does. So the way in which that is taken care of and how it gets handled on a board of 1 of 5, right, is much, much more influential than, say, assemblyman or senator. In all the boards and commissions that you participate on, as a county supervisor, we have a staff of 10 in my office. And then on top of that, we oversee 22,000 employees, right? We have a direct impact on the day-to-day operations that happen there. So people say, oh well, the highest one was these people out in New Hampshire that made the legislature or something like that. And I think the legislature is up there, but when it comes to influence, it's actually not even equitable in any shape or form.
So you think that Jeff is probably the highest elected Libertarian Party member, running, not counting somebody like a Ron Paul, but who ran as a Republican, but the highest elected Libertarian ever? Or or at least in the top few?
At least in the top few. I mean, I ran his race, so I've got a bit of a bias.
Right? Oh, yeah.
But, with that said, I think that objectively we can look at that and see how much influence a person has and identify that as being one of the higher ones.
Yeah. Now, I know this would be a very difficult undertaking, but are there any plans in the works to try to take another seat or maybe one or two, maybe two more seats on the Riverside County Board of Supervisors for the Libertarian Party?
So, look, I'll tell you this. I don't look at the geographics or the location before I pick a candidate. Right? I look for candidates that want the job. Right? So many times libertarians have to be voluntold to run for an office, and it never makes for a great candidate. Candidate's stock and trade is ego. You absolutely have to have ego to be able to play. And if I said, Andy, please run for city council.
I might not be a good candidate.
You might not be as great of a candidate. Right? So I'm not looking necessarily at the geography of the situation. I'm looking at the next brand of candidates that are moving up through the ranks. I want to see libertarians moving from, volunteering on their planning commission like Jeff did, going to city council, getting themselves elected to mayor, moving up to county supervisor or even to legislative positions, because that's the way it's supposed to be done. There are the process of governing, and as a libertarian, as a libertarian bureaucrat, I'm kind of in a weird place. But the process of governing and the tools and the gamesmanship that is played there is learned by coming up through those ranks.
Yeah.
Right. If I just grabbed some libertarian schmo off the street and threw him into the legislature, he'd be lost. He'd be in a lot of trouble. He may not have policy positions that he believes in. He may not know all the acronyms. He may not know the policies or how things get done. But by moving them up through those ranks, they're exposed to those things. By placing them on boards, they're exposed to those things continually. And I think that's the way to success.
Yeah, well, what he did, the victory was a pretty monumental victory. I know you guys spent how much money on the campaign?
$550.
Wow, $550,000. Wow. Well, he won, so it was definitely worth it, and I'm sure he got a message out to a lot of people.
We knocked about 60,000 doors.
That was actually going to be my next question.
Yeah, we knocked 60,000 doors, which was kind of the big. There was only about 100,000 voters that had participated in the election.
Now, that was actually, you led into my next question. Sure. I've been saying for years that door-to-door canvassing and just on-the-ground, boots-on-the-ground outreach is really one of the most important things that the Libertarian Party ought to be doing more of.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad to see that you all were doing that, because here's the thing. Libertarians are frequently shut out of the mainstream news media. They don't really give us fair coverage as compared to the Democrats and Republicans. And so the only other ways we can reach people are either by the internet, and not everybody's necessarily going to visit our website. Some people will, but not everybody. Or just going out and talking to people.
Yeah.
And going out and talking to people one-on-one in meet space is one of the most effective things. Now, how many doors did you say you guys knocked on?
60,000.
Where did you find your door-to-door canvassers?
We hired them.
Okay, did you hire people from? I heard that Young Americans for Liberty was getting involved in some door-to-door stuff. Did you have anybody?
We had a lot of YAL activists that came out and helped us.
Oh, okay, wow. And where were you hiring YAL activists, or where were you where were you hiring people?
We had a consultant help us out with that process.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I'll ask you. I was going to ask you who it is, but you don't have to name that. I could ask you that off camera, unless you want to name it. Okay, that's okay. We can talk. I'm curious. I'll ask you off camera. Anyway, moving onwards. So you're working for Jeff now? You're part of his administration?
Yeah, so I ran his campaign, and afterwards he asked me to come on and be his chief of staff. So
cool.
I'm now managing his day-to-day operations in the office. And basically kind of there to act as an Imperium when he's not there. I take a lot of his meetings and do a lot of fun stuff, just kind of keep him out of the trouble.
Now, when he was running, did people try to smear him with the libertarian label? They'll take some oh, you want to legalize heroin or something, or you think kids should walk down the street with machine guns?
You saw some of that. Mostly it was trying to hitch him to the Democrats was kind of the biggest issue, right? The Republican was running a very, very partisan type race. He did an interview with Adam Kokesh in 2013 or 2014, where he says that he says, quote, I like Rachel Maddow, although I only agree with her 1% of the time. I think that she's a genius and sees things that nobody else
likes
would.
the show,
He likes her thought process.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So our Republican opponent, with his endless buckets of money, decided he was going to take that and edit out one of the words, so that instead of saying that he agreed with her 1% of the time, it said, I like Rachel Maddow. I think she's a genius. And played that on every Fox station, on the Golf Channel, over and over and over and over and over. So we had some pretty nasty attack ads that came out against us. Mailers were really wicked. The local fire union there put up billboards in Jeff's hometown saying, when you nickel and dime your fire station, you put people's lives at risk. There was an organization called Safer Calamasa, which really kind of went out to slander the campaign and Jeff as a whole, as he was fighting the fire department issue in Calamasa. These organizations came out and stood against him. So the fire unions gave big money. The public employee unions gave big money. So we had, it was a really tough fight that way.
Yeah, that's so basically they tried to make him out like he was a Democrat plant or stalking horse to siphon votes away from Republicans or something, or that he was a sock puppet for the Democrats. That's what they were trying to do.
Their plan was terrible, and I can't even begin to try and suss what it is that they were thinking.
Wow.
So.
It was also kind of a guilt by association thing, because he said, okay, I've watched Rachel Maddow before, and I don't really care for Rachel Maddow. Occasionally she might say something once in a while that I agree with, but sure. I disagree with her more often. But, there were times, and I don't watch her show regularly or anything, but I've watched it before, and there were times that maybe it was entertaining or interesting or something, but it doesn't mean that I so what they'll do is they'll say you listen to and fill in name of hosts, Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh or whatever, just because you listened to it or watched an episode of it and maybe you were entertained by it or maybe you might have agreed with something the host said, doesn't mean that you're totally in line with the host of the show. That's a right. guilt by association smear.
Yeah.
A fake, not even a good guilt by association smear, really, because it's a loose association.
Those guys pissed away a lot of money trying to beat us, and we pulled it out.
So how many people were vying for the position that he was vying for?
5 in the primary.
Okay, and what was their party breakdown like? I mean, I know they're officially nonpartisan, but it's 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and then Jeff Libertarian?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, even the Republican assemblyman we went up with was in bed with the unions while he was in the assembly. He wrote some pretty egregious bills to give them some overarching powers, and when you look through his legislative history, he was no friend of even Republicans, which we made clear. So it was there was a district representative for a Democratic senator, another Democratic woman, and then it was the chief of staff for the outgoing supervisor, who was kind of down the middle, and then the Republican assemblyman, who was also kind of down the middle. So it wasn't a really clear cut. Wasn't a clear-cut pack the first time.
But that's pretty amazing that he was able to overcome all that and prevail. Yeah. And a lot of people think that libertarians can't win. A lot of people have no idea that a libertarian's ever been elected to anything.
Sure.
And and a lot of people say the votes are rigged and stuff. And I think there's actually some truth to that the votes are rigged. I don't think they necessarily rig every election. Because if they did, Jeff wouldn't have won. but I mean, I think that does happen sometimes. But I think they don't really need to rig every election, because the way things are set up with the media coverage, the debates, usually shutting libertarians or other third parties out, and the campaign finance, and just all the institutional advantages Democrats and Republicans have, that the deck is already stacked against us. But we can still win.
I don't want to cry about how hard it is for libertarians.
Yeah.
Right? If you look, I mean, the fact of the matter is that if we're running a hurdles race, our hurdles are higher and we have to run farther. That's just the long and the short of it.
No, you're right.
That's the situation that we're in.
Yes.
So we could piss and moan about the inequality of the race, or we can go out there and win.
Yeah, well, you guys proved, and I want lots of people to watch this video, and I want to talk to Jeff later, but you guys just proved something that I've been saying for years, and that's that libertarians can win. We just have to get out there and put in the hard work, and I think you guys did a great job, and I certainly commend you on that. Do you have any more plans for managing other campaigns in the future?
Yep, I've got a consulting company that I plan on keeping busy with liberty-minded candidates as far as long as I can. So keep a lookout. You can find me on Facebook, Boomer Shannon. If you want to reach out, talk to me. Let's do it.
What's the name of your company?
Egg Seed Press.
Okay. And I was talking to Ken Molman, LP member from Kentucky.
Yeah.
And he said that you guys did some polling.
That's right.
Which was very interesting.
Yep.
And you had some, like, what were the questions you asked in the poll? And
that's kind of a hard question to answer. So we ran a split poll. So basically what that means is that we ran a name ID identification. So do you recognize this name? Do you recognize this name? Do you recognize this name? And tried to get an idea of what name ID looked like right, in the primary. And then we ran a couple of issues questions. So we ran opposing questions to see kind of where people lean. So we ran those, and then do you plan on voting? And then so we ran a couple of those in the primary and to kind of get a feel for where the lay of the land was and what we wanted to do for strategy. And then during the general, it was obviously we only had a heads up race. It's basically just straight name ID. Do you recognize these names? Who do you think you're going to vote for? And trying to get an idea of that. But because we were so drastically underfunded, we were not able to run a lot of polls. We had some donors that wanted to be able to give generously to the campaign, but they wanted to see fresh polling information, so we were kind of forced to run polls earlier than we hoped to, and then we're not able to run any more polls later on. So I think our last poll was about 8 weeks, and at that poll it showed us about 7 or 8 points down. So we really closed the gap. And what was really interesting about this race is that in the absentees, the way that it works is that election night at 8 o'clock when the polls close, they release all the absentee ballots. We were down 13 points on those particular ones, and it's about 2/3 of the voting that happens is by absentee. So it was looking really, really dire for us. But the math that I had and I had predicted earlier that day that we were going to win by 51.5. That was going to be our vote total. So we go through the party and the numbers are starting to creep up a little bit as they're starting to count election day polls. What was really interesting is that on election day we took 67% of the delta. Right. So
what's the delta?
The delta. So basically.
Oh, you mean like in the math term?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, what happens is that the people that voted on 67 people that have voted on election day voted for Jeff Hewitt. Right. Whereas a large proportion of them that voted absentee did not. So we were able to kind of in that last 8 weeks really crush out and basically catch up all the distance.
Now, I know California has early voting, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Did you station people at like polling places at all?
Oh no, it's by absentee.
Oh, okay. But did you have anybody at polling places on election day? I think in California, if you're electioneering, you could stand like 50 feet away, something from the polls.
Well, we didn't do exit polling. We didn't do actually at the polls work per se, but we did work heavy intersections, the kind of the geography of the area, and we had a couple of places that we knew that we were going to be really tight and that we wanted to take. So we really worked, something similar to that, but we worked to make sure that we had bodies on the ground for that.
Oh, now as far as your polling with Ken Molman, is it something like you asked people about like what issues they were interested in or something like that, and like corruption? I think he said was number one.
Yeah, I don't recall the results of those.
He said something like 4 or 5 different issues that were the most important.
But corruption was the big one. Right?
Yeah. Now, when they were asking people about those issues, did you like come with a preset list of issues, or did you just ask people like, hey, what issue is important to you, and just whatever they said they took down?
No, they were. It was a closed-end question.
Okay. Do you have any idea how they came up with those issues to ask people about?
I did.
Oh, okay. You did?
Yeah.
Okay. What led you to those issues? Was there any reason like?
Yes, I had a narrative that I was trying to understand. Right? I have a candidate, and I have an opponent, and I have these two narratives, and I have strengths and weaknesses. I'm running a SWOT analysis. I'm running a couple other things that I'm trying to do to kind of get an understanding of what the race looks like. Where am I finding conflict between my candidates? How do people feel about those conflicts? Right. So there's a bit of a methodology to that, and I'll be going out and speaking at a lot of libertarian conventions this year about that. But there's actually a methodology there that works.
So you're really implementing some pretty high-level strategy here. This isn't just some guy winging it. You know what I mean? You're really putting a lot of hard work and thought into this, which is good.
This was a full-time job for a year, and in the last 8 weeks, I was working 120 hours a week.
Wow.
We had volunteers. We used big data. We used a custom CRM system. We used voter verification software. So we have an infrastructure that's built up to do this. We've been building this for a very long time, and we're finally at the point where we're going to be able to turn it out. We find a good candidate, and we're able to put all the horsepower to the ground and make it happen.
Are you going to be teaching libertarians in other states how to do this stuff?
Anybody who wants to listen, I'll be in Minnesota and in Ohio. I think I'm going to Florida. I'll be in California speaking. I'll be at National Convention in 2020 in Austin giving a speaker's tour. And if you guys run an affiliate or want to be able to talk to me, I'm more than happy to reach out.
Yeah. Now, I know one big thing to look at is like the breakdown of the voters in terms of like what their party registration is, and just in my own anecdotal experience, I found that people who are registered, nonpartisan or independent, which in California I think they call declined to state a political party.
No party preference.
Yeah, no party preference. Well, yeah, no party preference. Did you do any analysis on like, okay, we have X number of Democrats, X number of Republicans, X number of declined to state or whatever, no party affiliation, X number of Libertarians, and did you target any outreach to those groups or different types of outreach to different groups? I found that independents are more likely to vote Libertarian or be open to Libertarian than your typical Democrat or Republican. So.
Yeah, so we ran a couple of different campaigns inside this campaign. So one of them was speaking to Republicans about the race. We made a caricature of our opponent as Pinocchio with the SEIU holding the strings, and a little ditty at the bottom that says, "I've got some strings to hold me up, special interests to fill my cup. Vote for me, and you will see they've got some strings on me."
That's pretty creative and funny.
Yeah, I know, and yeah, so it was really good, and we had a lot of response from Republicans. And then for the Democrats, we used imagery of kids standing behind caged fences and talking about the egregious racist bills that he ran, right? And so we used a lot of targeted marketing to be able to reach out to those folks. But what had happened in the primary is that in order for him to get through, he had pushed himself very, very, very far to the right. He was the most conservative candidate because that was a lot of his local support was that way. My job as a campaign manager is when somebody does that, I come through and run my campaign down the middle. Right, I differentiate myself from him in a lot of ways. Everybody on the left we're able to talk to because we do Spanish ad radio. We're attending large Spanish events. Jeff speaks Spanish, which is helpful. So we were able to kind of capture the left in a lot of ways. But my job as a campaign manager is to make sure that we kept him as far to the right as possible. To take every moderate Republican, every moderate independent, and all the Democrats.
Did you guys do any voter registration as a part of your campaigning?
Yes.
Okay.
There was at the door. If somebody wasn't registered to vote, we just did that.
That's a great idea. There was a Libertarian running in Pennsylvania several years ago for the state legislature.
Yeah.
And through some mismanagement issues with the national and state party, he didn't get enough signatures to make the ballot. But he was a really gung-ho candidate, and so he decided to run as a write-in. And he ran a very aggressive campaign. He spent like $26,000 in a three-way race. I think it was for state senate. And a lot of that money came out of his own pocket, a little bit of it was fundraised. But anyway, him and two or three other guys, they went and knocked on every door in the district, including the people who weren't registered to vote. And they had professional-looking campaign literature, and they had blank voter registration forms for the people who weren't registered.
That's right.
And they got a lot of those people registered. Anyway, he got 17% of the vote as a write-in candidate.
So we didn't encounter a lot of unregistered people at the door because we had used a very heavily targeted list. So we used our Tier 1 list, was people that voted in 100% of the primaries, 100% of the general. Tier 2 was people that voted in half the primaries, 100% of the generals. Tier 3 was half and half, right? So what happened is that as we're going through a neighborhood, we're hitting all the Tier 1 houses, marking which ones got hit, which ones didn't get hit, and then taking that list, folding it over on Tier 2 houses and running that district and running that race. So that we're being sure that we're hitting these houses and they're getting hit multiple times in separated increments, right? So we'll run a neighborhood and a week later we'll come back and hit that same neighborhood again with a different list. We know which houses we've already contacted. We know which houses have been littered. Right? How are we going to be able to engage them again, right? So the heavily metro areas that we were able to really kind of focus in and give a very, very strong campaign.
And do you know how many times you knocked on a door in the district?
So the average for a Tier 1 house, which is 50% of the 100% of the primaries and 100% of the generals. A Tier 1 house was knocked twice, generally.
Wow. And did you guys do any like yard signs, like when you found somebody was a supporter and says, hey, would you put up a yard sign?
Yeah, no, a yard sign in a yard is 10 times more powerful than a yard sign on the corner, and I'll tell you why. Because every day when your neighbor gets out to pull out of his house and drive down the street to go to the feeder to get on the freeway, he sees that Jeff Hewitt sign. So what we found is that if we had house A on X street, right? And we put a yard sign in our first pass. We convinced somebody at the door, hey, will you put a yard sign and support Jeff Hewitt? If you put a yard sign in that person's yard, the houses that are within 5 houses of that house are like 3 times more likely to take a yard sign to your second pass. So what happens is that on the main strips, you see, Russ Bogue, our opponent's name is Russ Bogue. You see Russ Bogue, Russ Bogue, Russ Bogue, Russ Bogue. But when you pull into your neighborhood, all of your neighbors have identified that they're for Jeff Hewitt, right? And that has a much, much, much stronger effect on being able to take entire.
Because the people might know him. You have some, what do you call it? There's a word for that. I can't think what it is right now. But it makes you, familiarity, credibility. Like, hey, my neighbor Joe is voting for this guy, and I really like Joe. And so if Joe's voting for him, this Jeff Hewitt guy must be okay.
Yeah, but what happens is that when you run that same neighborhood a couple of times, if you have the kind of resources like we did, we had great walkers that were really, really good, and we had great training. So these guys knew the play. I mean, we were in there making sure that they understood what was going on. They understood why we were doing the same neighborhood again. They understood why the same guy was walking the same doors that he was 10 days ago, right? Because we wanted to have that same effect. We wanted him to bump into the neighbors. We wanted him to feel like it was communal, right? But I think one of the biggest aspects of our campaign that was beneficial is that we trained libertarians how to run campaigns.
Yes.
One of the things that I do that's a bit different than most of the campaigns that I've ever worked on is that I run an open office. My door is never shut. And we talk every morning. We sit down and we do what we call stand up. It's what'd you do, what'd you learn, right? So you get up and you say, yesterday I knocked 200 doors and I got 70 opens, and out of those 70 opens I got 25 yard signs. You get a little round of applause and you talk about an issue that you had. Well, I went to this door and this little blue-haired lady had a dog, wouldn't quit barking, so I had a really hard time getting my message across to her because it was very loud. She didn't have her hearing aid or whatever the problem is. And you have everybody that's working for you in the room at that time, every single day, they're in there hearing these struggles and learning. What happens is that they are training each other, and you're training everybody in the room. Why it's beneficial to a campaign manager is that I get to listen to what the reactions are. When somebody gives somebody a hard no, they often talk about that. When somebody gives somebody some shit about something, you hear about it in those meetings. You're able to direct your guys to be able to handle that problem and be able to explain to them, how to get past it. On top of that, you talk about methodology. Hey guys, this is what the next mailer is going to look like. It's coming out on this date. We're getting ready to do this event, this event, this event. Make sure you promote those when you're out there today. You guys are going to be in the city of Paris. They've got their fair going on. Get people out to see our booth. Get people out to meet Jeff. He's going to be there on Saturday at this time and this time and this time. What you're able to do by doing that is that everybody in that office, from the person that's just answering phones and volunteering a couple hours a week to the person that's working for me full time, has an idea of methodology from beginning to end. They understand, they see the process of marketing, they see how the fundraising is going, they see the conversations with the candidate, they see everything else that goes on, so they're going to be able to go over and take that and replicate it immediately. Right now, there's going to be some trial and error for those guys as they move forward, but they've got a really good, solid foundation instead of some campaign manager that's in Sacramento running it from a distance. Right? They have an understanding of what that race looks like. So I think that if we have campaigns that are run with that open methodology, because there's nothing I got to hide about it, we're going to run that race as hard as we can. Yeah. And, mole or no mole, it's going to be the same strategy no matter what we're going to do. We've picked our strategy. We know which direction we're heading. We're going to make it happen. But I've had people that work for us. Out of the 4 best people that we had on our campaign for the primary and the general, one of them now works for me at the county of Riverside. The other 3 were out in Chicago running a race for alderman. Those guys are going to continue to go out and run races for Liberty candidates. So I'm very proud of not only this race for Jeff and for the county of Riverside and for our supervisors for Libertarians, but I'm most excited by we have other activists that have learned how to run campaigns in an aggressive and efficient manner that are going out there and making it happen.
Yeah, that's exactly. And I'll wrap it up in a few moments here. I want to say one idea or thing I've thought for a long time is, and this would be maybe a goal for future elections, is for libertarians to try to take control of a city or town council or a county commission. Obviously, doing that in Riverside County would be very difficult because it's so. I mean, it was a monumental effort to get Jeff elected. But there's a lot of low population cities out there or counties where it would take a lot less money and manpower to do that. Like in Florida. There's a town called, what's it called? Oh, geez. Frostbite, or Frostbite, Florida. Is it Frostbite or something? Frostproof, Florida. Libertarian Party has 2 people on the city council. And if they capture one more seat, and here's the guy right here. I'm interviewing him about your campaign for my YouTube channel. That's the candidate. Hopefully we'll be talking to him later. He's elected official, elected libertarian. They do exist.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, what are your thoughts on that? Trying to take over a local board,
I don't think you find races geographically. It's not the way to go. Find the candidate. Find the guy that wants to do the job. Find the guy that's ethical. Find the guy that's got the ego. Find the guy that's got the skills to do it. Don't look at it geographically. I love you, Andy, but I disagree with you on this 100%.
Okay.
It's not about the locality. It's about the candidate.
Okay.
Right, and finding the right race for them. Right, if you have your candidate first, then you find the right race. Right, if you got a guy that's been in the assembly, run him for Senate. Right, if you got a guy that's never run before, run him for planning. Put him on the planning commission and talk to him in a year. Right, when's your next cycle? You got races coming up in 3 years. Get yourself on the planning commission now. Start showing up to your local events. Start showing up to the Rotary. Start showing up to the Quains. Or go to the Elks Lodge. Start hanging out with people. Begin to build your identity inside of that community first. Right, don't look at it geographically. It doesn't benefit.
And what do you think about libertarians putting a strong focus on if you find somebody, if you have the right person, obviously, getting elected sheriff?
I think that's probably one of the strongest things you could do.
Yeah. I've long thought that that's something that libertarians should really target.
Those unions don't mess around. That is a lot of money, and it is a big organization that is tied up in a long-term system that is built to run for generations and generations and generations. To run a disruption campaign in a race like that is very expensive and, quite frankly, dangerous.
Yeah. Well, the idea I had, and I've talked to some people in the LP in New Hampshire about this, and they said they agreed with me, was if libertarians around the country kind of like found, let's just say hypothetically, somebody in New Hampshire or wherever, it doesn't have to be New Hampshire, but some small jurisdiction says, hey, I want to run for sheriff, I've got this experience, I'm really serious about this. And libertarians around the country kind of targeted donations to that sheriff candidate. I think if libertarians could elect a sheriff somewhere, because the sheriff, can appoint deputies, they could appoint libertarians as deputies, and, we could have like a county where, libertarians are running law enforcement.
Sure.
Some people have referred to this as the deputize them plan. I actually made a video about this about a year ago. Did you? Oh, you saw my video? I don't know if you saw it, but maybe you heard about it from somebody else. Or I'm sure I'm not the only one that's talked about it. But anyway, what are your thoughts? I mean, do you think this is a good, a viable plan?
I think it's entirely cost prohibitive, right? For instance, the sheriff's race in Riverside County that was on the same ballot as us, Riverside Sheriff's Association spent $1.5 million supporting your sheriff's candidate. $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Right, for a job that pays $200,000 a year for 4 years, you do the math.
Well, that's why I was talking about some place like maybe Cheshire County, New Hampshire, or something.
Sure. No, and look, the larger the county, the harder it is. But the point is that there is a disproportionate amount of support for a race like that.
Yeah.
Right, because it is so immensely powerful.
Yeah. So the establishment really doesn't want libertarians taking that office, basically.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you've got to find somebody that's qualified. You got to find somebody
like Oath Keepers. You familiar with Oath Keepers or constitutional?
Yeah, you got to find this guy. Yeah, an Oath Keeper guy would be great because he's somebody that's already been in law enforcement or in military background that's able to move into those positions and is liberty-minded. Certainly, right? But that's, again, find the candidate first.
Yeah.
You find an Oath Keeper that lives in Cheshire County that has the qualifications and the ability to run for sheriff, take that race. But make sure that you've got a campaign manager that understands the dangers and the rules, what's going on.
Yeah. Okay, now we'll wrap it up here. Before we go, do you have any websites you want to plug or anything?
You can check out the Libertarian Party California, ca.lp.org. The Vote Hewitt page is down currently, but just give us. We're going to be having a district website coming up for District 5, so you can check us out over there. We'll be seeing some of the legislation that we're pushing forward and some of the things that we're doing.
Your personal website?
Eggseedpress.org, I think.
Eggseedpress.org. So any libertarians out there running for office, if they want to get in touch with you, go to eggseedpress.org.
Well, just contact me on Facebook. It's probably best.
Or look for Boomer Shannon on Facebook.
Yep, I'm Boomer_Shannon on all the social media, Instagram, Twitter, everything like that. You guys are more than welcome to follow me. Give me a holler. It's always my ugly mug on the picture. So
okay, and this is a guy you want to talk to if you're a libertarian who really wants to win. So
that's right.
Thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you later. Good luck in the future.